Part 1. The Galactic Council had existed for thousands of years. It was made up of over 200 different alien species from all corners of the galaxy. Some were ancient, wise, and peaceful. Others were powerful, proud, and used to getting their way. All of them believed they knew how the universe worked. And for a long time, they barely noticed humanity. Earth had only joined the galactic community a few decades ago. Humans were seen as young, loud, and a little too eager. They built fast ships, asked too many questions, and smiled even when things went wrong. To the Council, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. Interesting, but not yet ready to run with the adults. That was why, when the Council sent an invitation to Earth for its centennial summit on Varelli's Prime, most diplomats across the galaxy assumed it was just a polite gesture. The summit was a grand event held once every 100 years. Leaders, ambassadors, and scholars from every member species gathered to discuss peace, trade, and the future of the galaxy. Including Earth was seen as a kind gesture, nothing more. But Earth took it seriously. After weeks of debate, the United Planetary Alliance chose Daniel Brooks to represent humanity. He was not a general, not a politician, and not even a career diplomat. He was a quiet man in his late 30s with calm eyes and a steady voice. He had spent most of his life studying alien languages and cultures, not giving speeches or signing treaties. He preferred listening to talking and thinking to arguing. Some people called him boring. Others said he was the most patient man they had ever met. Daniel accepted the assignment without hesitation. He packed a single bag, said goodbye to his sister in Montana, and boarded the shuttle to Luna Station. From there, he transferred to the interstellar liner Aurora, which would take him to Varelli's Prime, a world of shimmering towers and floating gardens, built by the Virulons as a neutral meeting place for all species. When he arrived, the first thing he noticed was how little attention he received. Delegates in flowing robes or armored exosuits swept past him without a glance. Robotic attendants bowed to reptilian nobles and insectoid scholars but barely acknowledged the human in plain gray clothing. Even the registration clerk, a soft-spoken being with 4 eyes and lavender skin, seemed surprised to see him. "Earth?" the clerk asked, blinking slowly. "You are alone?" "Yes," Daniel said with a small smile. "Just me." The clerk nodded and handed him a badge that glowed faintly blue. "Your quarters are in Sector 7. Meals are served in the Unity Hall from 800 to 2000 Standard Time. Please do not enter the Chamber of Voices unless summoned." Daniel thanked him and walked away, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. He didn't mind being ignored. In fact, he preferred it. It gave him time to watch, to listen, to understand. Over the next 2 days, he attended opening ceremonies, cultural exchanges, and quiet meetings in garden courtyards. He spoke with a jellyfish-like scholar from the Andromeda Rim, shared tea with a bird-like trader from the Cygnus Reach, and even helped a young delegate from the Krell Collective fix a broken translation device. He never bragged. He never raised his voice. He simply showed up, paid attention, and treated everyone with respect. Still, whispers followed him. "That's the human," someone would say. "The one from the blue planet," others would chuckle. "They sent just one. And he doesn't even carry a weapon." To many, Daniel seemed harmless, maybe even weak. What they didn't know was that Daniel carried something far more powerful than a weapon. Years ago, near the edge of the solar system, a deep space mining crew had discovered a derelict ship buried in the ice of a dwarf planet beyond Pluto. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, organic, and covered in strange glyphs that pulsed with faint energy. Inside, they found no bodies, only a single chamber filled with a web of crystalline fibers. At its center lay a small, smooth orb. Scientists called it a neural archive. It belonged to a species known as the Cathari, warriors and philosophers who had vanished from the galaxy over 10,000 years ago. The orb contained not just knowledge, but a living echo of their minds. After years of careful study, Earth's top researchers found a way to interface with it, safely, ethically, and only with volunteers. Daniel had been the first. The procedure had changed him in ways no one could see. His brain now worked faster, sharper, and with greater clarity. He could read body language like a book, predict movements before they happened, and process danger in milliseconds. The Cathari gift wasn't about violence, it was about awareness. About seeing the whole picture when others saw only fragments. But Daniel never spoke of it. He didn't want fame or fear. He only wanted to serve. On the third morning of the summit, he woke early. The sky outside his window glowed with soft violet light. Virelli's prime had 2 sons, and dawn here was a slow, beautiful thing. He dressed in his usual gray tunic, checked his schedule, and headed to the Hall of Concord, a long, crystal-lined corridor that connected the main chambers of the council. It was a quiet place, often used for private talks or moments of reflection. As he walked, the air felt still, too still. The usual hum of distant voices and floating drones was gone. His steps echoed slightly and his skin prickled with a quiet warning. He slowed his pace. From the shadows ahead, figures emerged, 6 of them, tall and armored in matte black suits. Their faces were hidden behind smooth masks, and in their hands they held energy blades that hummed with deadly light. They moved in perfect silence, surrounding him in seconds. One of them spoke, voice distorted by a modulator. "Human, you should not have come." Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply stood there, hands at his sides, eyes calm. The lead attacker lunged. What happened next was so fast that even the security cameras would struggle to capture it clearly. Daniel's body moved before his mind seemed to catch up. He sidestepped the blade, grabbed the attacker's wrist, and twisted. The blade clattered to the floor. A second attacker fired a plasma bolt, but Daniel was already behind him, using the man's own momentum to slam him into the wall. 2 more rushed in from the sides. Daniel dropped low, swept one off his feet, and used the other's shoulder to vault backward, landing lightly on his feet. His eyes flickered with a faint silver glow. Just for a second. The remaining attackers hesitated. That was their mistake. Within 10 seconds, all 6 lay on the ground, unconscious, disarmed, or groaning in pain. Daniel stood in the center of the corridor, breathing steadily, his tunic slightly torn but his expression unchanged. Alarms blared. Footsteps pounded down the hall. Council guards arrived, weapons raised, faces stunned. Overseer Lyra Vaughn, a tall Virellan with silver hair and sharp eyes, pushed through the crowd. She stared at the scene, the fallen mercenaries, the untouched human, and her voice trembled with disbelief. "Who are you?" she demanded. Daniel met her gaze. "Just a diplomat," he said softly. But they didn't know that. Far too, the Hall of Concord was silent, except for the hum of emergency lights and the low groans of the fallen attackers. Council guards stood frozen, their weapons half raised, eyes wide with confusion. Overseer Lyra Vaughn stepped forward slowly, her silver robes brushing against the smooth floor. She looked from the unconscious mercenaries to Daniel Brooks, who stood calm and still in the center of the chaos. "Explain this," she said, her voice sharp but controlled. Daniel kept his hands visible. "I was walking to the morning session. They came out of the side passage. They didn't speak much. Just attacked." One of the guards knelt beside a mercenary, pulling off the mask. Beneath it was a scarred face with gray skin and sharp teeth, a known species from the Outer Rim, often hired for dirty work. Another guard scanned the energy blades with a handheld device. "These are Zenthar-made," he muttered. "Restricted models." A ripple of tension moved through the group. The Zenthar hegemony was not a council member. They were a militaristic empire that had refused to join the alliance for centuries, believing strength came from conquest, not cooperation. They had clashed with several council species before, and their hatred for rising powers was well known. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Why would they target a human diplomat? Daniel didn't answer right away. He glanced at the corridor behind him, then at the ceiling sensors. He knew the council would review every second of footage. He also knew that if he said the wrong thing, Earth could be blamed for provoking an incident. "I don't know," he said finally, "but they expected me to fall quickly. They thought I was alone, defenseless." Lyra studied him. There was something in his posture, too steady, too aware. Most beings would be shaking after an ambush. Daniel looked like he had just finished a quiet walk in a park. She ordered the guards to secure the prisoners and escort Daniel to the observation chamber, a secure room used for sensitive debriefings. As they walked, whispers followed them through the halls. Delegates peeked from doorways. Some looked afraid, others curious. A few watched Daniel with new respect. Inside the observation chamber, soft light filled the room. The walls were soundproof and lined with memory foam. A single table stood in the center with 2 chairs. Lyra sat across from Daniel. "Tell me everything," she said, "from the moment you left your quarters." Daniel did. He described the stillness in the corridor, the way the air felt wrong, the exact sequence of movements during the fight. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't downplay. He simply stated facts as if recounting a weather report. When he finished, Lyra leaned back. You moved faster than any baseline humanoid I've ever seen. Faster than our elite guards. How? Daniel hesitated. This was the moment he had hoped to avoid, but secrets had a way of surfacing in places like this. I carry an implant, he admitted. It's not a weapon. It's a neural aid, from an ancient species called the Cathari. Lyra's breath caught. The Cathari? They vanished before my ancestors built their first city. You're saying Earth found their technology? We found a ship. One ship, buried in ice. Inside was a neural archive. We studied it for years before attempting integration. Only volunteers were used. I was the first. And this implant, it lets you fight like that? It lets me see threats before they fully form. It sharpens my senses, my reflexes, my judgment, but it doesn't make me aggressive. It makes me careful. Lyra was silent for a long time. Then she stood and activated a wall panel. A screen lit up showing security footage of the ambush. Frame by frame, it replayed Daniel's movements. The way he dodged the first strike by less than a centimeter. How he used the attacker's own weight against him. The precise angle of his countergrip. This isn't just enhanced reflexes, she said. This is tactical prediction. You saw 3 moves ahead. Yes, Daniel said. She turned to him. If you had wanted to kill them, you could have. I didn't, he replied. Because I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk, Lyra nodded slowly. She believed him. But belief wasn't enough in the council. Evidence was. And politics were. Over the next few hours, investigators swarmed the scene. Medical teams examined the prisoners. Forensic drones scanned every inch of the corridor. Meanwhile, news of the attack spread like fire through the galactic network. Species that had ignored Earth for years now sent urgent messages. Some demanded answers. Others offered support. A few loyal to the Zenthar accused humanity of staging the attack to gain sympathy. Back in his quarters, Daniel sat by the window, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. He felt tired, but his mind wouldn't rest. He knew the Zenthar hadn't acted alone. Someone had hired them. Someone who wanted Earth discredited or destroyed. A soft chime sounded at his door. It was Maya Ellis, a young xenocultural analyst from Earth who had come as part of his support team. She stepped inside holding a datapad. They traced the payment, she said quietly. Shell companies, fake identities, but the trail leads back to a Zenthar trade minister named Corvex. He's been vocal about stopping human expansion. Daniel nodded. They wanted to make it look like I started the fight. Maybe even that I killed someone. Then the council would expel Earth. The Zenthar could move against our colonies without interference. Maya sat down. What do we do? We tell the truth, Daniel said. All of it, no hiding. No spin. The next morning, an emergency session was called. Every council delegate gathered in the grand chamber. A vast dome where light from 1,000 stars was projected onto the ceiling. Daniel stood at the center podium alone. No notes, no armor. Just his voice. He spoke for 20 minutes. He explained the Cathari discovery, the ethical safeguards Earth had put in place, and the fact that the technology had never been used off-world until today. He showed logs from the Aurora proving he carried no weapons. He played the unedited security footage. Then he said something that stunned the room into silence. If the council believes this technology is dangerous, I will have it removed. Right here. Right now. Earth will surrender the archive. We don't want power. We want a seat at the table, not because we're strong, but because we're trying to be better. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the far side of the chamber, a delegate from the Myrathi Concord, a species known for their wisdom and silence, stood and bowed deeply. Others followed. Not all. Some still looked uneasy, but the tide had turned. Later that day, council analysts confirmed the mercenaries' comms had been routed through a Zenthar military relay. The evidence was clear. The attack was not random. It was an act of sabotage. Lyra Vaughn called Daniel to her private office. She offered him tea, real Earth tea imported years ago and saved for special occasions. You changed minds today, she said. I just told the truth, he replied. She smiled faintly. Truth is rare here. That's why it's powerful. But as they spoke, alarms blared across the station. A priority alert flashed on every screen. The Zenthar hegemony had mobilized its third fleet. Destination: Sol system. Daniel's calm face tightened. The Zenthar weren't waiting for the Council's judgment. They were going to strike first. Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of concern. "What will Earth do?" Daniel stood. "We'll defend our homes, but we won't start a war." He walked out of her office, his mind already racing. The ambush had been just the beginning. Now the real test had arrived. And this time, billions of lives were at stake. He didn't know it yet, but his quiet presence, the very thing the galaxy had mocked, was about to become humanity's greatest weapon. Part 3. News of the Zenthar fleet's movement spread through the Council like a storm. Panic flickered in the eyes of even the oldest delegates. The Sol system was far but not unreachable. The Zenthar Third Fleet was one of their strongest, over 200 warships, each armed with plasma cannons and gravity disruptors. Earth's defenses were good, but they had never faced a full-scale assault from a Tier 2 power like the hegemony. Daniel Brooks sat in a quiet room deep inside the Council spire, listening to reports from Earth. His sister's voice came through a secure channel, calm but strained. "We're ready," she said. "The orbital grids are active. The Mars garrisons are on high alert, but if they come in force, it won't be enough." Daniel closed his eyes. He had spent his life avoiding violence, seeking understanding. Now, war loomed because someone had mistaken kindness for weakness. A soft knock came at the door. It was Overseer Lyra Vaughn, her usual composure replaced by urgency. "The Council is in emergency session. They're debating whether to intervene." "Will they?" Daniel asked. "Some say yes. Others say this is a human problem. The Zenthar haven't broken any official treaties yet. They're still in their own space." "But they're heading for ours," Daniel said. Lyra nodded. "That's the line we're watching. Once they cross the Kuiper exclusion zone, the neutral boundary agreed upon centuries ago, it becomes an act of war against the whole Council." Daniel stood. "Then we stop them before they cross it." "How?" she asked. "Earth can't send ships that far in time, and the Council fleet takes weeks to mobilize." He looked at her. "Not a fleet. A message. Delivered in person," Lyra frowned. "You want to go out there alone?" "Not alone," Daniel said. "With witnesses. With the truth," he explained his idea. A small envoy ship, unarmed, marked with Council colors, would meet the Zenthar fleet just outside the exclusion zone. On board would be Daniel, a few neutral observers, and live transmission gear broadcasting to every Council world. If the Zenthar fired on a peaceful vessel carrying a diplomat and witnesses, they would be exposed to the entire galaxy. It was risky. It was bold. And it just might work. After hours of debate, the Council agreed. Not because they trusted Earth, but because they now saw Daniel differently. He had shown restraint when he could have killed. He had offered to give up his advantage for the sake of peace. That kind of honor was rare. 3 days later, Daniel stood on the launch deck of the Council shuttle Wayfarer. It was small, sleek and painted white with silver insignias. No weapons, no shields beyond basic radiation cover. Just engines, comms, and a cabin for 6. With him were 3 observers, a Myra the Elder named Tyle, a Krell data keeper named Joran, and Maya Ellis from Earth. She had insisted on coming. "Someone has to make sure you don't do anything stupid," she'd said with a half-smile. As the shuttle lifted off, Varelli's Prime shrank behind them, its towers glinting in the twin sunlight. Ahead lay empty space and the approaching shadow of war. The journey took 4 days. Inside the Wayfarer, time moved slowly. Daniel spent hours reviewing Zenthar customs, their history, their leaders. He knew Corvex, the trade minister behind the ambush, was ambitious but not reckless. He wouldn't risk total war unless he thought he could win quickly. On the 5th day, sensors picked up the Zenthar fleet. 200 ships moving in perfect formation like a school of steel predators. They were just outside the Kuiper exclusion zone waiting. The Wayfarer slowed to a stop a safe distance away. Daniel activated the broadcast link. Every Council world, every major station, every listening post in the galaxy now saw what he saw. He opened a channel. "This is Daniel Brooks of Earth, speaking under the flag of the Galactic Council. I come in peace. I asked to speak with Fleet Commander Rel Tor." Silence. Then a gruff voice crackled through. Human, you are in restricted space. Turn back. I'm outside the exclusion zone, Daniel said calmly, and I carry no weapons. Only witnesses. Only truth, a pause. Then, state your purpose. I want to know why you're here, Daniel said. Is it because your mercenaries failed? Because a human diplomat survived your ambush? Or because you fear what you don't understand? Another silence. Longer this time. Then the lead Zenthar cruiser powered down its forward cannons. A smaller vessel detached from the fleet and moved toward the Wayfarer. It matched speed and opened a docking port. They're inviting us aboard, Maya whispered. Daniel nodded. Stay here. Keep the feed live. He stepped into the airlock alone. Inside the Zenthar ship, the air was thick and warm. The walls pulsed with faint red light. Warriors in dark armor stood at attention, their eyes fixed ahead. At the end of the corridor stood Fleet Commander Rel Tor, a tall, broad-shouldered Zenthar with scarred cheeks and cold eyes. You have courage, human, Tor said. Or foolishness. Maybe both, Daniel replied. But I didn't come to fight. I came to ask, what do you really want? Tor studied him. Your species grows too fast. You build colonies near our borders. You trade with our enemies. You speak in council chambers as if you belong there. We do belong, Daniel said. Not because we're strong, but because we try to listen. You attacked me because you thought I was weak. But weakness isn't the same as peace, Tor's jaw tightened. Peace is for the powerful. The rest must obey. Then why haven't you fired yet? Daniel asked. You have 200 ships. I have 1 shuttle. If you're so sure of your power, why talk? The commander didn't answer right away. He looked past Daniel as if seeing the live feed, the watching galaxy. Finally, he said, Core Vex acted without my full approval. He believed a show of force would silence Earth. And now? Daniel asked. Now I see you are not so easily silenced. Back on the Wayfarer, the broadcast continued. Daniel reported what had been said. The council watched. The galaxy listened. Within hours, the Zenthar fleet began to turn. Not all the way home, but they halted at the edge of the zone. A message came through official channels. The hegemony would reconsider its position pending further talks. It wasn't victory, but it was a chance. When Daniel returned to Varelli's Prime, he was met not with suspicion, but with quiet respect. Delegates who once ignored him now nodded as he passed. Some even stopped to speak. Lyra Vaughn met him at the docking bay. You did what armies couldn't, she said. I just showed up, he replied, but they both knew it was more than that. He had faced a fleet not with weapons, but with presence. Not with threats, but with truth. That night in his quarters, Daniel received a message from Earth. His sister had watched the broadcast. She wrote only 3 words, "We're proud." He looked out the window at the stars. The galaxy was still dangerous. The Zenthar were still watching. But something had shifted. Humanity was no longer invisible. And Daniel Brooks, the quiet diplomat with ancient power in his mind, had given his people something more valuable than weapons. He had given them a voice. Part 4. The Zenthar fleet did not leave right away. It hovered at the edge of the Kuiper exclusion zone like a storm waiting to break. Back on Varelli's Prime, the council remained tense. Some species argued that the hegemony's move was a bluff. Others feared it was only the first step in a larger campaign. Earth's colonies held their breath, ready to defend but hoping not to fight. Daniel Brooks spent his days in quiet meetings. He spoke with delegates from species he had never met before. Some who had once mocked humanity, now asking how Earth had developed such discipline, such restraint. He never bragged. He simply explained that humans had learned the hard way that violence solved little and cost much. But beneath the calm talks, a new plan was forming. Lyra Vaughn called Daniel to her office one evening, her face serious. The Zenthar are stalling, she said. They want to see if the council will act or just watch. If we do nothing, they will cross the line. And once they do, war becomes inevitable. Daniel nodded. Then we give them a reason not to cross. How? She asked. A joint task force, he said. Not to attack. To stand guard. Ships from the council, positioned just inside the exclusion zone. A clear message this far and no farther. Lyra's eyes widened. That's never been done before. The council doesn't form military alliances. It's not an alliance, Daniel said. It's a presence, a show of unity, and I'll go with them, not as a soldier, but as a witness. If the Zenthar see even their rivals standing together, they'll think twice. She was silent for a long time. Then she stood. "I'll call an emergency vote." The next day, the grand chamber filled with delegates. Tension hung in the air like static. Lyra presented the plan. Many objected. The Marathi were cautious. The Krell worried about precedent. But then, one by one, smaller species spoke up. A delegate from the Helios Concord said, "The Zenthar burned our outposts 10 cycles ago. We stood alone then. We won't again." A representative from the Vexian Union added, "If Earth can face a fleet with one shuttle, we can land one ship." Even the usually silent Marathi elder Tail rose and said simply, "Balance must be protected." The vote passed by a narrow margin. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Council would deploy a unified observation fleet, not to wage war, but to prevent it. Ships began arriving within days. A sleek scout from the Helios Concord, a heavy cruiser from the Vexian Union, a cloaked vessel from the Krell Collective. Even the Marathi sent a small, shimmering craft that seemed to bend light around it. In all, 37 species contributed vessels. They gathered near the edge of the exclusion zone, forming a loose but visible line between the Zenthar and Sol. Daniel boarded the lead ship, the Varelli's Watch, a lightly armed but fast council vessel. Maya Ellis came with him, now officially his aide and the only other human on the mission. The crew was mixed. Varellans, Krell, even a young Zenthar defector who had fled his homeworld years ago and now served the council. As the fleet took position, Daniel stood on the observation deck watching the Zenthar ships on the view screen. They were massive, dark, and bristling with weapons, but they did not move forward. Days passed. Then a week. Supplies were rotated. Messages were exchanged. The Zenthar commander, Rel Tor, sent a single transmission. "We see you." Daniel replied with one word. "Good." Back on Earth, people watched the news feeds with hope. Children drew pictures of the council fleet. Schools held lessons on galactic diplomacy. For the first time, humanity felt not like outsiders, but like part of something larger. Then, on the 12th day, the Zenthar fleet powered up its engines. Alarms blared across the Varelli's Watch. Crew members rushed to stations. Maya grabbed Daniel's arm. "They're moving," but Daniel didn't panic. He studied the data stream. "Not toward us. They're turning." Sure enough, the massive fleet began a slow, wide arc, away from the exclusion zone back toward Zenthar space. A final message came through, this time from Minister Korvex himself, his voice tight with anger but also something else, reluctant respect. "The hegemony will not be the first to break galactic peace," he said. "But remember this, human. We do not forget." The fleet vanished into warp space, leaving silence behind. Cheers erupted on the Varelli's Watch. The crew embraced. Even the stoic Krell operator gave a rare nod. Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Daniel simply closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened a channel to all ships in the task force. "Thank you," he said, "not just for standing with us, but for standing together." The fleet held position for 2 more days, just to be sure. Then one by one the ships returned to their home systems. But something had changed. Bonds had formed. Trust had been built. Species that had never spoken now exchanged open frequencies. When Daniel returned to Varelli's Prime, he was met not with suspicion, but with something new, expectation. Delegates stopped him in the halls, not to question, but to ask for advice. A young Marathi student asked how he stayed calm under pressure. A Vexian captain wanted to know how Earth trained its diplomats. He answered each one simply, honestly. He never claimed credit. He always pointed to others, to his team, to Earth's values, to the courage of the council species who had stood firm. Lyra Vaughn invited him to dinner in her private garden, a place of floating lanterns and soft wind chimes. Over a meal of spiced fruit and warm bread, she said, "You've done more in 3 weeks than most diplomats do in a lifetime." "I didn't do it alone," Daniel said. "No," she agreed. "But you gave others a reason to act." Later that night, alone in his quarters, Daniel received a message from Earth's leadership. They offered him a permanent seat on the Diplomatic Oversight Committee, a position of great influence with power to shape humanity's future among the stars. He read the message twice. Then he typed a reply. "Thank you, but my work is not in committees. It's in the spaces between words, in the moments before violence." Let me train others to do what I did. That's how we build a future that lasts. He sent the message and turned off the screen. Outside, the twin moons of Varelli's prime rose over the city, casting silver light on the towers below. The galaxy was still vast, still dangerous. But it was no longer cold. Because now, in more places than one, humans were seen not as intruders but as partners. And Daniel Brooks, the quiet man who carried the mind of an ancient race, knew his real mission was just beginning. Part 5. The Galactic Council chamber was full. Every seat was taken. Delegates from over 200 species stood as Daniel Brooks entered. This had never happened before. Humans had been guests, observers, even suspects, but never honored like this. The air hummed with quiet energy, like the moment before a storm breaks into rain. At the center of the chamber stood Overseer Lyra Vaughn. She held a small, glowing orb, the seal of accord used only once in a century. She raised it high and her voice rang clear. By the will of this council, and in recognition of courage, truth, and unwavering peace, the United Planetary Alliance of Earth is granted full membership in the Galactic Council. A wave of sound followed, not just applause, but clicks, chimes, hums, and resonant tones from 100 different species, each expressing approval in their own way. Some bowed. Others raised their hands or wings or tentacles. Even the usually silent Mirathi shimmered with soft light. Daniel stood still. He did not smile widely or raise his arms. He simply placed a hand over his heart and gave a slow, deep nod. It was a human gesture, simple and old, but in that moment it meant everything. After the ceremony, offers poured in. The Vexian Union invited Earth to join their trade network. The Krell Collective proposed a joint research station near the asteroid belt. The Helios Concord asked for human advisors to help train their young diplomats. For the first time, Earth was not begging for a place at the table. It was being asked to help build the table itself. But Daniel turned down every offer of personal power. When the council offered him a permanent seat on the Diplomatic Oversight Committee, he politely refused. "I'm not a politician," he said. "I'm a teacher now." He meant it. Before he left Varelli's prime, he met with Earth's delegation and laid out a new plan. Instead of sending just one diplomat to future summits, Earth would train a whole new generation, men and women who understood alien cultures, who could listen before they spoke, who carried no weapons but were ready for danger. And at the heart of their training would be the Cathari archive, not as a secret weapon but as a tool for awareness, used only with strict ethics and full consent. His first student was Maya Ellis. She had stood by him through the ambush, the fleet standoff, and the long nights of planning. She had the same calm mind, the same steady heart. She would be the next face of humanity among the stars. The day Daniel left Varelli's prime, the sky was clear. The twin suns cast long shadows as he walked to the shuttle bay. Delegates lined the path not to cheer but to watch in silence. Respect didn't always need noise. Maya walked beside him, carrying a small case that held the only copy of the Cathari neural interface approved for off-world use. "You sure you don't want to stay?" she asked. "You could shape policy for decades." Daniel shook his head. "Policy changes with the wind. People change the world. I'd rather teach them how." The shuttle Aurora waited on the pad, the same ship that had brought him here weeks ago. It looked smaller now, quieter, like an old friend. As he stepped aboard, he paused and looked back one last time at the spire, the place where he had been attacked, doubted, and finally understood. He thought of the attackers in the Hall of Concord. They had seen a man in plain clothes and assumed he was nothing. They didn't know he carried the wisdom of a lost race. They didn't know that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the loudest truth. Back on Earth, crowds gathered at spaceports and city squares, not to celebrate a war won but a peace earned. Children waved flags with Earth's blue marble beside the Council's silver spiral. Teachers spoke of Daniel not as a hero, but as an example, proof that you didn't need to shout to be heard. In Montana, his sister waited on the porch of their old home. She didn't run to him when he landed. She just smiled and said, "You look tired." "I am," he said, "but it's a good tired." For weeks he rested. He walked in the woods. He fixed the old fence behind the house. He drank coffee at sunrise and watched the deer move through the mist. It was simple. It was peaceful. And after everything, it was exactly what he needed. Then the work began. In a quiet campus outside Denver, the first class of Earth's new diplomatic corps gathered. 30 students from every continent, every background. Some were soldiers. Some were scientists. Some had never left their hometowns. But they all shared one thing. They believed talking was better than fighting. Daniel taught them how to read silence. How to spot a lie not in words but in the flicker of an eye or the shift of weight. He showed them how to stay calm when threatened, how to de-escalate with tone and timing. And for those who volunteered, he guided them through the Cathari interface, not to make them faster or stronger but more aware. He never called it power. He called it responsibility. Years passed. The Xanthar hegemony never attacked again. Instead, they opened limited trade talks with Earth, wary but no longer hostile. The Council grew stronger, not through force but through trust. And at the heart of that trust was a lesson learned from a single human diplomat, that true strength isn't in how hard you can hit, but in how well you can listen. Daniel never returned to the Council spire as a delegate, but his students did. And when they stood in the grand chamber, calm and clear-eyed, species from across the galaxy knew exactly who they reminded them of. One evening, long after sunset, Daniel sat on his porch again. The stars were bright. Maya's voice came through the comms unit. She was on Varelli's Prime handling a minor dispute between two trading guilds. She sounded tired but confident. "I think I got them to agree," she said. "Good," Daniel replied. "Just remember, listen first." "I know," she said and laughed softly. "You've only told me 1,000 times," he smiled. The galaxy was still vast. New threats would come. Old fears would return. But now humanity had a voice that others respected, not because it was loud, but because it was honest. And as the wind moved through the trees, Daniel Brooks, the man who had faced a fleet with nothing but truth, closed his eyes and listened to the quiet hum of a world at peace.